세션이 특별 강연을 이어가도록 하겠습니다. 특별 강연은 AI 국가주의 글로벌 기술 패권 경쟁이란 주제로 진행이 됩니다. 특별 강연 세션의 첫 번째 문을 열어주실 분은 옥스퍼드 대학교 마틴 스쿨 AI거버넌스 로버트 트레거 디렉터님입니다. 네, 일정상의 문제로 인해서 부득이하게 영상으로 참석해 주셨습니다. 저희가 준비한 영상 함께 보시죠.
Greetings. It's a pleasure to be with you at AI World, hosted by Financial News and the Ministry of Science and ICT. I'm Robert Traeger, Director of the Oxford Martin AI Governance Initiative at the University of Oxford. I'd like to start today by giving you a sense of what AI nationalism means around the world, and then moving to talk about what we need to do as a globe to govern AI to ensure it's safe and benefits everyone. So I'll start with Germany. As you can see here, when a company like Microsoft makes a major investment in a place like Germany, they get a meeting with the German Chancellor. Microsoft is in fact investing 3.2 billion euros to expand AI and cloud infrastructure in Germany, its largest investment in the country to date. The investment will expand the cloud region in Frankfurt and develop new infrastructure to meet the rising demand for AI and cloud solutions. Part of the funds will train over 1.2 million people by the end of 2025 in AI models and applications through Microsoft's Azure platform. Now, in the United States, US President Biden issued an executive order in October 2023 focusing on safe, secure, and trustworthy AI development. The Biden administration also secured voluntary commitments on AI safety and transparency from 15 major tech companies. The administration announced a $50 billion investment in domestic chip making, seemingly to reduce reliance on Taiwan amid security concerns. And in May 2024 of this year, the administration began moving to close loopholes in export controls of AI chips. In fact, several countries are required to purchase a license to buy AI chips from October 2023. These are elements of AI nationalism, and we can see many such elements around the world. In China, AI is a top national priority, highlighted in China's 14th five-year plan ending in 2025, and demonstrating an ambition to become the global AI leader by 2030. In 2021 to 2022, China invested nearly $300 billion to build a domestic chip supply chain for AI, reducing reliance on Western suppliers, supporting production by Huawei, SMIC, and others. It also established 50 data exchanges, enabling small AI companies to trade commercial data and compete effectively. It established a world-leading algorithm registry and an AI safety ecosystem, making significant strides in regulating the technology. There is much more to be said about these cases, and indeed about many others. What I'd like to do now is to give you a bit of an overview of AI investments around the world. So you can see in the graph here, which by the way is in billions of dollars of investment by country, that China is investing a huge amount, as in fact are other countries. And I think maybe the most interesting thing in this graph here is that almost all of this investment by governments is going into chip fabrication. Some investment into AI companies, but chip fabrication, that is to say production, is really what many governments around the world are spending a lot of money on. And it's also interesting to look here at venture capital investment into startups. So this is not governments, this is venture capital. And we can see here that some of these numbers are also very large, in fact, larger than the numbers we were looking at of government investment in the previous page. And so, there is a huge amount of AI nationalism. There are national programs around the world in the AI sector, but actually the private sector is really where continues to be the place where a lot of the action is, but not everything, certainly. So hopefully that starts to give you a sense of what AI nationalism means around the globe. I want to transition a little bit now to talking about what we need to do as a globe and the ways that we need to cooperate, because against this backdrop of AI nationalisms, we also have a set of common challenges. And I've listed some for you here on this slide, but this is by no means all of the challenges. So we need to ensure global access and that these technologies, which hold amazing potential, can benefit people around the globe. We have to prevent misuse in domains like cyber and bio, but in other domains as well. We need to prevent harmful loss of control to AI systems, something that used to sound like science fiction, but unfortunately no longer does. We need to mitigate workplace dislocations. We need to identify AI content so that when people think that they're interacting with another human, they really are. And all of these challenges are things that we really can't do as individual societies. They're really global challenges. So how can we come together to do these things in such an AI nationalist context? Well, before giving one answer or a set of thoughts really on that question, I just wanted to emphasize how international these challenges are. So this slide shows us the models above a certain size that have been developed around the world. And you see the first two countries are perhaps not a surprise. The United States and China, followed by the United Kingdom, have been developing the most models. And the fourth country here is the Republic of Korea, which has also developed a sizable number of models. And if we continue to scan down the list, we see that really there is development of large models around the world. So the challenge of governing advanced AI is really a global challenge. So how might we think about doing it? Well, maybe we can learn a little bit from things we've done in other industries. That is, ways that countries around the world have cooperated in other industries. And probably there are four things that we need to do when we're thinking about particularly governing civilian AI. The first of those things is developing legitimate international standards. A second thing we need to do is set incentives for adoption of those standards at the international level. A third thing is to cooperate to animate the safety regime in ways that we do, in fact, in other industries. And a fourth thing is to cooperate to ensure broad voice in the governance of the technology and access to the technology. So I want to say a little bit about each of those and give you a sense of how we might think about those things. So we need to consensus on standards. That's a really hard thing to do. It's always hard to do, and it's particularly hard when we think about some of the safety standards for AI technologies that we may need today. Developing safety standards is really doing cutting edge research, and that's not what standards organizations usually do. Usually they distill an existing body of knowledge into standards, whereas in this case, we need cutting edge research to create these standards in the first place. And existing standards orgs definitely have a role to play, but there's some new orgs that maybe can help here. So some of the research capacity to develop standards seems to be landing at these AI safety institutes. And it may be that those institutes will form part of a network, and alongside other actors from industry, academia, civil society, and traditional standards orgs, that may be a route to developing international standards. Second, setting incentives for adoption at the international level is something that is very nuanced and challenging in other industries, but happily we have some models for how we might do that. One thing that some of these organizations that I've put on the slide here have in common is that they're not auditing firms in the private sector. What they do is they work on standards and they audit regulatory structures within states to be sure that they have appropriate regulation, and in some cases that they have a track record for enforcing it. So the International Civil Aviation is one example that's up here, or the Financial Action Task Force, or the International Maritime Organization, and others. They do the same thing. Civil Aviation Organization, what they do is they're not going to audit Korean Air. They're not going to audit British Airways. What they do is they look to see that the states have appropriate regulation. And how does that then set incentives? Well, countries around the world can adopt laws that say, well, if another state isn't complying with the regulations of the International Civil Aviation Organization, then we're not going to accept any flights that come from that jurisdiction. And so we could do a similar thing. For instance, in the AI area, states could say, well, we're going to close off our markets to AI from any jurisdictions that are violating international standards. So these are the kinds of things that states have done before and have proved remarkably effective in some other industries. Another thing we can do is cooperate to animate the safety regime. So again, similar things that we do in other industries. We do international reporting sometimes. You know, in finance, for instance, we want to make sure that money laundering isn't happening, and it's a lot easier to make sure that no one is money laundering if all the different jurisdictions are cooperating with each other. And we can do some international reporting similarly in AI to make sure that nobody is leveraging international boundaries to get around regulatory rules. And probably compute providers can play a really interesting intermediary role here, similar to the role that financial institutions play in finance. So a financial institution might deny a customer access to financial resources until the customer passes some regulatory checks. We actually many of us have the experience of being denied access to our credit cards when we've raised some red flags. And I think compute providers may end up being in a somewhat similar position with respect to AI developers. That is, checking that regulatory hurdles have been passed, and then at that point only providing compute access. And finally, cooperating to ensure broad voice and governance and access to advanced technologies is essential, of course. What we have today are quite a bit of compute nationalism. As I was saying before, there's quite a bit of attempt to develop local compute clusters, and that's sort of allied to national pride in some ways. I'm not sure that that's always the best development strategy, though. I think there are other ways of accessing compute resources for many, many countries around the world, particularly when we're talking about the really massive scale compute resources required to train advanced systems. So maybe what we need is more capacity building, more responsible digitization, because often the lack of digital materials that really hampers states in the global majority. And that should be something of development, a focus of development initiatives around the world. So really, maybe what we need is a sort of an ecosystem. The good news is that we've seen similar ecosystems before. We've seen them in other industries. And hopefully, if we get the governance right, we shouldn't have to compromise between safety on the one hand and innovation on the other. So thank you very much for your attention. It's an honor to be with you, and I look forward to visiting Korea again soon. I wish you a successful conference and many productive discussions.
네, 로버트 트레거 디렉터님 좋은 강연 감사합니다.